Hi everybody and welcome to Simply Scuba and welcome to the deep dive. So today we're going to be taking a closer look at rash vests. So with it getting warmer and warmer now, dive season is almost upon us, and a very underestimated piece of equipment is the rash vest. So rash vests do a lot more than just help you put your wetsuit on or keep you from getting rashes. The material of the weave of rash vests don't let as much light through as a conventional t-shirt, so they're actually helping to protect you from harmful UV rays. Rash vests also help you to protect yourself from marine bumps and scrapes, as well as some stings. Spending a lot of time in the water can soften your skin, so if you brush up against something sharp or rough, it can actually break your skin. But the rash vest can help protect you, but more amazingly, rash vest material can also protect you from a lot of jellyfish and anemone stings, because their stingers simply aren't long enough to get through the material and into your skin. But there are some nuances to rash vests because they're not all made the same, so let's do a deep dive on rash vests. The material the rash vest is made from has a few benefits. So there are a couple basic rash vest materials. It's usually going to be polyester or nylon with elastane or spandex, some kind of combination of those, and there's going to be a couple benefits to each of them. So you're also finding some more natural fibers as well today, because unfortunately these plastic fibers are of course eventually entering our waterways and we don't want that. So you can find some natural alternatives as well, but the most traditional ones, they're made out of polyester or nylon. The elastane and spandex, the blends inside of them, they're just there for the stretchiness. The polyester or nylon are what the majority of the rash vest is actually going to be made from, and the two have slightly different properties. Polyester is usually the cheaper option and doesn't have quite the same stretch as the nylon alternative. Both are quickly becoming more and more made from recycled materials, either post-consumer plastic bottles or reclaimed ghost gear, but personally I tend to prefer nylon rash vests. I just prefer the way that they feel, and I find that they last longer. But all in all, they have, for scuba divers especially, fairly similar properties, to be brutally honest. I just prefer nylon just because I find it's slightly higher quality. All of the stitching is most likely going to be flat lock stitching. Flat lock is a very wide and secure stitch, but it's very soft against your skin. That's the whole point of a rash vest, is for it to be against your skin to prevent you from getting rashes and abrasions from repetitive motions. So flat lock stitching is going to help prevent that as well. When you're washing your rash vest, it's best that you hand wash it as much as possible. Too much agitation in a washing machine can just create those microplastics. It's going to just kind of pull out those sort of small fibers of plastic, and that of course just ends up down the drain and eventually into the oceans, which is exactly where we don't want it to be. So try and be as gentle as you can when you're washing your rash vest, and if your rashy starts to get a little bit worn in areas and the material thins, then dispose of it responsibly. There are actually companies out there that you can actually send your old rash vest to, and they will recycle it into something else. One of the best features of rash vests is that they protect you from the sun. They actually act like a permanent sunscreen, so you're actually covered up when you're in the water. A lot of suntan lotions can harm the reef, and even though it's only a small amount that you're putting on yourself, it adds up when everyone else is wearing some of it. But with a rash vest, you're covered up, so you don't actually need to use that UV protection because you're wearing it. So a lot of rash vests will actually have a UPF rating on them, or at least on the label, denoting how well they protect you from sunburn. Obviously, the higher the number, the better the protection, but a lot of rash vests will have a rating of 30, 50, or even 80 plus. The UPF number is effectively how much light the fabric cuts out, so a rash vest with UPF 50 rating only lets 1/50th of the light through, so it's only allowing 2% of light to get through. It's blocking the other 98%. And obviously the less light that gets through, the better it is for you. Just because a rash vest doesn't mention a UPF rating though, doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It probably just means that they haven't gone to the extra expense of having the material tested. The material weave is much tighter than that of a standard t-shirt, which is what makes them more effective at physically blocking sunlight even when the material is wet or stretched. They call it grinning. A normal t-shirt isn't really made to protect you from the sun, especially when it's wet, whereas a rash vest is. Some rash vests can be chemically treated with UV protective treatments, but they're not great for the environment, so they're best avoided. The chemicals can eventually leak out or leach out from the fabric, which is exactly the opposite of what we want. That's one of the reasons why I wear a rash vest in the ocean, to avoid those chemicals from getting into the water and harming the reef. So if you do see any kind of treatments in the description of a rash vest, then personally I avoid it, just for the benefit of the oceans. The fit of a rash vest is important for a couple of reasons. So rash vests are either going to be tight or loose fit. They're the two basic categories that they come in. So a tight rash vest is going to be snug against your body, and a loose fit isn't. There's not much more else to it, but a tight fit rash vest, they're nice and hydrodynamic, and they're gonna be great to help get you in and out of a wetsuit. That's where they excel, because they act like a second skin with less friction. But worn alone, when you kind of bend and flex, that portion of the material is stretching and is actually grinning and letting more light through. It's not going to be a ton of light, but it is going to be exposing yourself a little bit more in that particular area. Loose fit rash vests don't stretch when you bend and flex, because they have all of that extra material, so the material never actually stretches, so they can actually protect you better when you wear them alone in the water, especially on the surface. There's going to be a little extra drag in the water, but it'll be inconsequential. You really won't notice it. The only place where you might notice that extra fabric is when you're wearing it underneath a wetsuit, because the material might bunch up in places, especially when you're sort of trying to get a long sleeve loose fit rash vest in underneath a sleeve. Loose fit rash vests can often have open necks, more like a traditional t-shirt, whereas tight fit often have a longer neck that actually give you a bit of extra protection around your neck, both from the sun and from your BCD shoulder straps. And then of course you find long and short sleeve rash vests. Long sleeve covers all of your arms up to your wrists, and they'll often have a thumb loop to kind of hold the sleeve in place, particularly handy when you're wearing it to help put your wetsuit on. Rash vests, they also tend to be quite long in the body, so you're always covered even if you stretch, and some even have a small loop at the front so that you can tie the bottom of the rash vest down to the front of your board shorts to actually hold them down in place. If you are worried about coverage though, you can sometimes find full body rash vests that are just effectively wetsuits made from rash vest material. So where you want to be covered from head to toe, but you don't want the buoyancy or the warmth of the wetsuit, you just get a full body rash vest. For women, they also make rash leggings to match the tops, so you have a two-piece to cover yourself up and protect your legs from the sun as well as bumps and scrapes. Most rash vests are about as thin a material as you can get. They're incredibly thin and they won't give you any thermal benefit, but if you're diving in cooler waters and you need a little something extra just to take the edge off, you can get thermal rash vests. Now there are two different types. They're either going to be made from very, very thin, like 0.5mm neoprene, or they'll be a kind of 3-layer material, which is a sort of neoprene alternative. 1/2mm neoprene rash vests will have a smooth inner neoprene, but they are quite fragile, so do be careful with them. Because they don't have that internal lining like a wetsuit, so if you tug on one particular area, it's really easy to split that neoprene, so do be careful. They're also not breathable, it's neoprene. Now that only really affects you on the surface, but if you're underwater, it's quite hard for your skin to breathe anyway, but on the surface, in the sun, you might get a bit sweaty underneath it, because it is literally just, non-breathable neoprene t-shirt. They're great for cutting out UV though. I'd be impressed if any sunlight can penetrate through the neoprene, but you might get a little bit sweaty if you're spending a lot of time on the surface wearing one of these. Neoprene alternatives are becoming quite popular, and they're all fairly similar among the different brands. Some are going to have some special technology that makes them a little bit better, but they all typically have the same basic structure. They're usually going to be a 3-layer design with a fluffy inner layer that sits against your skin. Now that's primarily for surface water sports because that's going to be wicking moisture away from your body very quickly so you stay dry. But when you do sort of get under the water, it does help to add a little bit of insulation and trap the water against your skin and stopping it from moving. The middle layer of the fabric is a semi-permeable membrane that stops wind from cutting through and getting to you, but it does allow your skin to breathe. The outermost layer is there for strength and stretch. So these are quite cool for a few reasons. Worn alone in the water, they're somewhere like a 2mm sort of wetsuit alternative, but they're neutrally buoyant, so you don't need to add any extra weight if you switch to it. So if I'm diving somewhere warm and I'm just wearing a rash vest, but then it starts to get a little bit cooler, I'll just throw a thermal, one of these neoprene alternatives. I don't need to add any extra weight to my weight belt because it's not affecting my buoyancy, but it is keeping me a little bit warmer. You can wear it underneath a wetsuit, you can wear it underneath a dry suit. They're not primarily made for dry suits, but they will do the job. And yeah, you can always wear it underneath a wetsuit just to boost that warmth over your core. You can also find some rash vests that have electrical heated coils woven into them. The battery and everything, they're all going to be waterproof, and they have a little remote control as well, which is waterproof, so you can control the temperature, or there's going to be a button on the battery to control it. And they, of course, they have their depth limits that limit how deep you can take them. But if you really do feel the cold and you need a little extra something to help stay warm, then you can use some power. Now there is a huge caveat though when you do use these electrically heated undersuits or rash vests, in that you really do need to know how that heating may be affecting your decompression and what you should do if that battery suddenly runs out on the middle of your dive. So rash vests, there's a lot more than just a basic t-shirt that you wear in the water. The main choices is that whether you want it to be thermal or not, and then the fit that you want basically. They are definitely worth the investment though. I mean, I've owned cheap rash vests before and they really do just fall apart after a season or two, but I always keep a good rash vest with me in my kit bag for when the weather turns warm and I don't need my wetsuit. You can just throw that on and you know you're always protected. If you're spending a lot of time in the water, especially on the surface, it's cooling you down, but the sun is still bearing down on you, so it is important to cover up and try and do it with a rash vest instead of a suntan lotion. But anyway, there are plenty of rash vests on the Simply Scuba website for the diving season coming out, so check them out. There's going to be a link down in the description. Thank you for watching, and of course, safe diving.